I'm going to start a presentation very shortly, but just very, very briefly on myself. I'm obviously from New Zealand originally. I have lived in the States. I lived in Phoenix for 3 years and absolutely loved it. I used to be a regular visitor to Florida as well, which again, equally good, except in summer, a little bit too hot for me. Before joining MedAire, I had my own company supplying products and services to the superyacht industry. And that was during 2008. So that was an extremely stressful time as well. But this is absolutely unprecedented. So we're in totally uncharted waters here, so to speak. So I'll just start my presentation. Let me know when everybody can see it. It sometimes takes a little bit of time. My computer's getting a little bit on the ancient side.
Can see it.
Alrighty. So as I said, this is unprecedented time, and for the next 30 odd minutes, I'd like to take you through, it is a type of a strategy and a little bit of an understanding that there's two ways of looking at something like this. The first way is, oh my God, the whole entire sky's falling on my head and everything's doom and gloom, which this chart here clearly shows it is pretty doom and gloom. The other way of looking at it is also from a glass half full type of thing, which is this is potentially an opportunity to redefine my business, redefine my career, redefine my life in lots of different ways. And again, a lot of it comes down to attitude, but unfortunately, a lot of it also comes down to finances and stuff that is completely out of our control. So this was the snapshot of today, 3 million-ish cases, with very few countries testing anywhere near the capacity that they need to have any realistic understanding of the true infection rate. That could be by an order of magnitude, it could be 30 million easily. And without that data, it's very hard to have any sort of evidential methodology of opening up the country again and getting back to a new normal. The bottom left shows a growth trajectory chart of infections, and as what is put in the media quite a bit, flattening the curve, we're cresting top of the wave, all that sort of stuff. That's not technically accurate, and basically it's an artifact of both testing, social distancing, which is probably the most effective means of reducing the risk of contraction, and the case fatality rate doesn't also very well reflect what's going on either. And as the case fatality rate starts to drop down, we're starting to see the signal to noise ratio change as well, and we're starting to see other much more disturbing effects of the virus. And today, the last couple of weeks, there's been a number of articles in the pediatric journals talking about that children are affected, and in some cases very badly affected, but the numbers are still low, and the risk group that we sit in as well, no one's immune basically. The graph on the right though shows sort of what you may have heard previously about how many days behind the US was to Italy, or New York was to Germany, or places like that. This is a logarithmic graph, and again, if you're like me and went to school and ate your lunch, doesn't make a lot of sense. But from a scientific point of view, it shows that everybody's on the same growth scale. So there's some accuracy in that. And you know you're on the other side of it when you drop off that growth scale. So you can see a few of the countries have fallen off, although this map is now about a month old. But most of us, again, US, the UK, are well and truly still cresting up the top of the wave, and we're not too sure where that's going to go. So it is the great unknown, and that's the problem. We don't know what we don't know, and unfortunately in this particular case, don't know could kill you. So just a little bit of stuff on this. I do have a mental health background. I studied mental health at university. I worked with teenage suicide prevention, and we've got, as a company, that's disclosure, I do work for MedAire. We do provide medical services, including emotional support, to our clients. And we're also very proud of that. And we've done some surveys as well. This is one of the ones sponsored, and it shows a very high mental health aspect to the industry that we support and work with, which is not unexpected. And until recently, as an industry, we behaved very poorly to this group of people. We're all individuals, and we all have a breaking point, and some breaking points are closer than others. And that's brings pretty much onto what is the key topic here, and the key topic is stress. Also, by the way, I'm a huge fan of Gary Larson, so I've decided to run the risk of copyright problems, and I've got a few of my favorite Gary Larson cartoons. If you don't know who he is, definitely look him up. He is one of the best science cartoonists in existence. And the term stress, it means different things to everybody. So I picked up from the mentalhealth.org UK. Stress can be defined as a degree in which you feel overwhelmed or are unable to cope as a result of the pressures that are unmanageable, which to me clearly defines where we are at this moment. If you're in the airline industry, 95 to 98% of the airline isn't flying. 80 to 90% of employees have become unemployed. The US, I think we just topped over 30 million unemployed, which again is just unheard of. And so this fits squarely into this mark, and we don't know when it's going to get better. We don't know if it's going to get worse. The medical signs don't indicate anything flash. To be bluntly honest, there is no medication. There's no Hail Mary medication, no matter what anybody says. There is no vaccine in the foreseeable future, and there is even some evidence now that shows that vaccine may not be 100% effective. And just to knock us a little bit more on the head, we may not have long-lasting immunity either. There are so many unknowns, and instead of it getting better over time, we're just opening up more unknowns. So stress is probably the key driver to an impediment to see your way through what's going to happen next. And there's a reason for that. And for me, I'm very evidence-based. I like the science behind things. I like to understand why we do what we do. And stress was never meant to be a bad thing. It was a protective mechanism that we have built into us and basically are designed to survive. And it comes from this human operating system 1.0. It hasn't been updated for a while, so somebody's in trouble. And basically, it came out for all intents and purposes. I'm coming out of the cave, and I'm going to hunt woolly mammoth. Now, that is a very stressful operation for me as a caveman, because I'm now exposing myself to everything that wants to eat me. I'm not particularly fast. I'm not particularly tough. I'm a bit podgy and quite chewy, so I'm the perfect mealtime snack for a saber-toothed tiger. So I've got a huge amount of stress just going out the front door of the cave to go and hunt the woolly mammoth. And if I don't hunt, I get hungry, and then everything sort of downward spirals from there. So I was designed for a very large amount of stress for a very short period of time, because once I hunt my woolly mammoth, drag them home for the missus and the kids and the family to eat, I eat like kings for a couple of 3 days, and then I have to go outside my cave again. So the stress levels start to go up. So we've got an autonomic nervous system, and inside that autonomic nervous system, I've got the parasympathetic and the sympathetic, and they're like evil twins. They're constantly fighting against each other. One tries to rev you up, the other one tries to calm you down. And in this case here, the stress side is revving us up. Now, that was 100,000 years ago. That's not today. Today is what you've got along the bottom there. That's probably a good photo of me. I sit at the computer all day, and at the moment, the stress levels are constant. And you've probably heard this all the time, that there's stress every day. There's family stress, there's business stress, there's am I going to be able to pay the mortgage? Does a supplier going to provide the stuff on time? Is my customer going to pay? They're asking for 120-day terms. I've got a heavily invested in stock that's not moving. I've got employees. That's the spike. And again, we're an unprecedented amount of stress for an extended period of time, and we are not designed for that. And what makes it worse is all the hospitals are geared up and ready and treating COVID patients. And if you've read the news, heart attacks are down, strokes are down, all these other conditions that in theory should be higher are not turning up at hospital because they're scared to go because of COVID. And so they're not down, they're just not going to hospital. So there's even another issue that in the background that isn't being addressed, our high blood pressure, diabetes, and everything else. None of that's being managed well for a lot of people. So that's where we were designed for, and that's where we are now. So again, it's unfortunately for me, it's not a really rosy picture at the moment, but hopefully we can look at some strategies to try and mitigate that. So Fear, uncertainty, and doubt, for lack of a better term, the three horsemen of the apocalypse when it comes to stress. And the fear is real. It's a new virus. It's called a novel virus for a reason. We don't know what we don't know, and what we don't know can kill us. Fortunately, not a lot of people, but that seems to be changing over time. How bad is it? We don't know. We don't. Fortunately for us, initially it didn't appear that young, fit, healthy people or children were affected, but now we're starting to see a slight change in those numbers. Will there be a treatment? I know that politicians have been very keen to push the treatment bandwagon, but the evidence is unfortunately overwhelmingly towards the negative. The medications that are already in existence, that are designed for other conditions, may not fit very well with this present illness, and when tested on large amounts of people, may or may not be effective at all. But there is over 130 medications being assessed at this moment. So there may be one that will provide some certainty there, but at the moment, that doesn't seem to be the case. Vaccine, as I said before, we're not too sure where that's going to go. Can I afford to get sick? Will I die? I mean, these are all very serious and very important questions that, even if you're not asking them out loud, in the back of your brain, they will be kicking around, and that generates fear. That fear generates stress. Then on top of that, we've got this massive uncertainty. Do I have a job? It's 30 million Americans have got that now, saying I don't have a job on all intents and purposes. Will it affect my business? Again, I said in 2008, we were looking at this, and I'd come over to the States. I'd walk through the mall and it would be absolutely empty except for Apple shops. And I was sitting, oh man, I wish I had shares in Apple. But again, I've never seen it like that, and it affected worldwide. But again, this is magnitudes worse in this way. What is the government's direction? Can I rely on it? Will my suppliers provide? Will I get paid for the work I've already done or will do? So there's a significant amount of uncertainty. And unfortunately, I'm just reiterating what you already know. And then the uncertainty creates doubt. And this is the killer for a business when you start doubting yourself. And it's a killer for being innovative and coming up with novel solutions to problems, because that's the way out of it. And the doubt is, what should I do? Am I doing the right thing? What will others think if I go out of business, or I can't, if I've got quite a lavish lifestyle that reflects the type of business that I'm in, but in reality, it's not sustainable. So these are what you, for all intents and purposes, the three horsemen of the apocalypse. And all of these will just, as you see a circle, they just self-generate. And it's a very vicious cycle. And once you start driving into the cycle, it is extremely hard to get yourself out. So I'm hoping I'm making sense, but at the same time, I'm hoping that you realize this already. So that gets us, and I'm actually going quite fast for a change, which is really unusual for me. The way I describe it is it's like a pressure cooker, and everybody's got a finite amount of pressure that they can take. And at the bottom there, you got the stress coming in through the bottom, the pressure's building up on the inside, it's bubbling away. Some people have a very low thermostat for releasing pressure, and so they'll tend to pop off quite early, and we probably know those people. They nothing wrong with them at all, but that's just the way the thermostat is set. Other people, their thermostat is set very, very high, and it could take an enormous amount of pressure and stress before they pop off. But everybody's got a breaking point, no matter who, no matter how tough they are. They've got a breaking point, and from my experience, the higher that thermostat is, when the breaking point is reached, the more it sort of pops out and becomes an issue. And if the container bursts, then it's just catastrophic, and it's catastrophic for not just themselves, but a lot of other people as well. So there's what's called maladaptive and adaptive coping strategies. And what I want to look at here, there is no silver bullet. This has never happened before. So because of that, there is no great strategy to say, here's your 3-point plan for getting out of this particular issue. Here's a 7-point business model to pivot on the spot and do something else. There is no magic bullet for that. But the problem is that unless you take the time, get your head out of the weeds and start looking around, you're going to miss that opportunity that somebody either on one of these type of webinars or on YouTube or in the news or talking to your clients or stuff like that, you'll miss that opportunity that allows you to see a way out of the issue. And that's what I really want to focus on. How do you make that time? How do you create those opportunities? There was an interesting study done some time ago, and I'm literally blanking on what it is, but it's one of my favorite ones. They looked at luck, and they looked at people who are naturally lucky, and they looked at the opportunities that they were lucky in, and the end result was basically that that luck wasn't really the factor. The people had an open mind, that they created their own luck by seeing the opportunities out there that other people didn't. And so on the outside, you sit there and go, man, you were lucky you did that. But in reality, the person basically saw an opportunity, had the plan or the forethought to take advantage of that, and created their own opportunities, which we sometimes misinterpret as luck. And that's where I would love to be. Our business is suffering. There's no two ways about it. We were challenged by our CEO to create a new and improved company coming out of this, and to get very, very tight with our clients to understand what they are going through, so that we're able to better be prepared to help them and work with them in partnership on the other side of this. So we need to be there for that, because we have services that people do need, same as yourselves. So we'll look at the maladaptive side of this first. So, and we've all got this. No one's, well, very few people are perfect, apart from possibly the Dalai Lama. But the maladaptive is when the pressure builds up and you've got poor coping mechanisms and you've got good coping mechanisms. The poor coping mechanisms tend to make stuff worse, obviously. The good coping mechanisms tend to make stuff better. And I did a quick Google search on coping skills online and stuff like that, and it came back with 79 million results. So there's certainly enough of the information out there. You've just got to go looking for it in some cases. So when it comes to maladaptive, some of the stuff is junk food, excessive alcohol and drugs, emotional dysregularity, so losing your rag or getting angry over the smallest things, throwing stuff in the corner, yelling at staff, yelling at the wife, yelling at the kids, yelling at the husband, storming out, kicking the letterbox over. Again, frustration, and we've all suffered from it at some stage, and it's a way of relieving the stress. It's a way of relieving the pressure. It's not a great way of doing it. We know that junk food, if you look in the online, the consumption of junk food, whatever that definition is, has gone up considerably. And strangely enough, deodorant and soap purchases have gone down. So you can read into that how you will. But I'm definitely suffering from that. I have a whole drawer of crap in my there when I'm working here that I just snack on, and I'm not doing any exercise or very little of it. Excessive alcohol and drugs, again, a very, very common maladaptive coping mechanism. On the short term, it generally makes things better internally. In the long term, it never works very well. A big one is the inability to sleep. And again, most of you know this already and probably were very well versed in it. There's a great story about some English king who had a bit of a problem. He was in his cave and he was watching some little spider make a web, and he wasn't very successful. And he decided to have a sleep, and he had a dream about a spider making a web. Well, I'm paraphrasing. And he tried and tried and tried, never succeeded, and then eventually succeeded. And he woke up with the answer to how to become a king in the morning. And he would never have come up with that answer if he didn't get a good night's sleep. So for me, one of my coping mechanisms and one of my strategies that works for me is if I've got a problem, especially a big problem, I'll go to bed early and I will go to sleep, and I'll use my brain in the background to try and come up with solutions to that problem. That works for me. I don't know how well it works for other people, but it certainly works very well for me. Violence, obviously, domestic violence is on the rise. In some countries like New Zealand, it's gone up considerably. It's one of our dirty little secrets. We have a lot of unfortunate domestic violence, and in times like this, it brings out both the best and unfortunately the worst in people. And then the final result, when the pressure cooker bursts and you cannot see a way out of any problem, suicide then becomes a potential solution. And unfortunately also, and unfortunately we do see it in America a bit, is not only wanting to take yourself out, but make a statement at the same time. So the risk of the disgruntled employee coming back to the business, a person with access to guns and deciding that it's if he's going to go out, he's going to go out in blazing fire and make a statement in some way at a mall or someplace like that. And it's, again, unfortunate, but it is one of the realities that we have to sit with. And again, there is many of these. I just highlighted some of the more obvious ones, but everybody has both adaptive and maladaptive. If you let the maladaptive coping mechanisms take over, then you're in for a power of pain, to be honest, and there's no two ways around that. But saying that, there's always a change. There's always the ability to turn it around and start to focus on one thing at a time, whether it's to slow down the junk food or get more exercise or make a concerted effort not to yell at the dog. You can make little baby steps, and then eventually those little baby steps make a very big journey. Interesting enough, with the Fitbits, the Apple Watches, and a lot of other sort of biometric measurements, we're actually able to measure stress better than we've ever managed to measure before. And there is some physiological manifestations, so to speak, of that. Pulse is one, blood pressure is another one, and quality of sleep is another one. And all of those can actually be measured as a quantified way of, are you dealing with the stress or not? And although they're not the most accurate on an individual basis, over time, they do paint a fairly accurate picture of how you are coping and how you're managing. And this has been known for some time, but what we can do with that, a little bit unsure, but it's certainly something that you can monitor, as well as your diet and your exercise as well. So that brings us into the adaptive mechanisms, the ones that tend to work. And where I want to get to is providing the groundwork for you as a business, as an owner, as a supplier, as a yacht crew, as whatever the part of it is, to come out the other side better than you were before. You may be poorer, but you're better than you were before. You've learned some lessons, or you've got a new skill, or you've got strategies in place. That's where we want to be. And again, from our perspective, that's what our company wants to be as well. So probably the number one most effective way of stress relief is actually talking about it. We, as a company and little groups, we have a happy hour. We've got one after this. Going to get online. We're going to have a couple of beers. Going to chat about the week. It's been extremely pressured week. Lots of stuff going on, and it's a good way to use a little bit of social lubrication to be able to get stuff off our chest in a non-threatening, non-confrontational way, and relieve some of the stress. So just turning the old knob a little bit, allowing a bit of that stress to disappear. Another key one, and one that is really hard to do, especially if you own your own business, is take time off. Off duty, weekends and holidays. My biggest problem when I owned my own business was I never took time off, and I still don't take time off. I worked out one day that for me to bring $1 home, I got to make 27. And that always sat with me about every time I was counting out people's wages and stuff like that. I always sat there and went, how much money do I need to make this week? So, and when I was in the military, somebody told me a really good skill that I've used my entire adult life, that you wear a uniform in the military, and when you come home, you take the uniform off, you have a transition. For me, it's about 30 minutes. And you transition from the work and the pressure of work. For me, I like a bit of quiet, a book, or on my iPad now, look at some videos on YouTube. And about 30 minutes later, I get up and I start interacting with my family. But it's a transition time from work to home. And I've even done it without realizing it with my Apple Watch. I have a work Apple Watch face, and I have a home Apple Watch face, and they're very, very different. My work one shows me all my meetings and the emails and text messages and everything like that. So it's constantly beeping away, reminding me of all the meetings that I'm missing, etc. And when I transition over to home, I swipe across, and this one is about exercise, mindfulness, big digits because my eyes are going, and has nothing related to work in it whatsoever. So for me, that's another strategy that works very, very well for transitioning out of the pressure of my work to being able to enjoy my family, enjoy my 10-month-old Jack Russell Terrier, who normally at these sort of meetings is trying to kill my toes and my sock. Fortunately today he's having a bit of a sleep. But it makes that transition and makes that ability to relax. And again, if I talk about stress as being a key driver to in a negative, then being able to alleviate that by some simple strategies makes a big difference. A healthy lifestyle. I love this one because it's you just type up healthy lifestyle and everything's wonderful. It's a hell of a lot harder to do than to say. Especially at the moment with in Europe, we've had lockdowns that are absolutely severe, where we can't, in the UK, we can walk for 45 minutes once a day, somewhere where no one else is. And so we're allowed half an hour or so, 45 minutes of exercise per day outside. The rest of the time, you've got to be in your house. If you've got a garden or you've got a balcony, you're lucky, but a lot of people living in London, they've got neither. And so they literally spend about half an hour a day outside. In Spain and a few other places, they don't even have that until recently. So lockdowns are treated very differently in lots of different places for this. So a healthy lifestyle, and again, there's health coaches, all sorts of things out there that try to promote healthy lifestyles, and it comes down to a desire and a willingness to want to do it. Another one that works for me is exercise. I use exercise a lot to get stress away. For me, I do most of my best stuff in the morning. I get up early, I take the dog for a walk, and I listen to podcasts. Unfortunately, most of my podcasts at the moment are on COVID-19, trying to keep up with the research and everything else. So it's not exactly mindfulness, but it's getting there. Something that is relatively new on the block, but it's always been there, the term mindfulness, being in the presence. I've got a lot of the word I want to use is, it's not faith, but I've got a lot of confidence that mindfulness is one of probably the 3 or 4 best things that you can do. Get a good night's sleep, talk to people, take time off, and be in the present. So when you're with your family, you're with your family. Go outside, walk in the trees, enjoy the seashore, sit on the boat for a bit, and just force yourself to relax. And it's really hard at first, and it gets easier over time generally. And there's always professional life coach and counselors as well. So from my perspective, where I want to get to is that I'm not so much talking about if you do this and this and this, everything will be wonderful. What I'm trying to do is provide the opportunity for you to stick your head above the weeds and find that opportunity for you that you may have missed because you're so into the here and now and just trying to survive. Because that reality is like the hamster on the treadmill. He's running so fast to keep up with himself, and the faster he runs, the faster the wheel spins. It doesn't get any better. And so that's where we want to try and get to, is we want to try and slow down to be able to look around and come up with better ways of doing stuff, pivot in the business if necessary, provide a better service to the client so that when things start coming out the other side, you are still there with them. Alrighty. Again, it's my, I can't help myself. It's the far side. And stress, although we talk about it as being a negative thing, it is actually a good thing. It was designed to help us survive. The unfortunate thing is part of this human operating system, we are hardwired to the negative. And what I mean by that is, generally speaking, if you're a happy, fluffy duck person back in the caveman days, and you went out and danced around and sort of went, everything's wonderful, blue sky, lovely thing, what's that big cat looking at me? You're likely to get eaten because you're just not self-aware. And the person who's always out thinking someone's out to get them, what's that sound, what's that smell, am I in danger? They tend to survive longer. So bizarrely, we are actually, for all intents and purposes, often hardwired to a negative attitude, and we really got to go out of our way to make things happy. I don't understand why that it is so hard, but it is. But understanding that we may actually be physically hardwired that way makes life a little bit easier to understand. And I have this Goldilocks formula. I've got Goldilocks formulas for everything from IV fluids up into trauma treatments, etc. But this one's same sort of Goldilocks formula, not too little, not too much, just the right amount. If there's not enough stress in your life, you don't get out of bed, basically. If there's too much stress in your life, where we are at the moment, in the middle there, you've got a good idea. The execution may not have been 100% because you didn't think it all the way through, because you haven't had time to do it. And then the third option is there is stress in your life, but you're able to pivot very quickly and focus on solutions rather than the problems. So to be honest, the cartoon on the right there is my all-time favorite Gary Larson cartoon. I don't know why it appeals to me, but it just does. And I think it's mainly because the expression on the poor bugger is going to get made into a trophy very shortly. Any questions at all? I know it's short and sweet, but I didn't want to keep people too long.
Actually, I've got one. You know, for me personally, I don't have any employees, but I do know that there are people who are on our call right now who have a handful of employees. You know, what should we be looking for in terms of maybe potential warning signs that they may be too stressed out, besides, you know, things like excessive alcohol consumption? Obviously on the job, if we see that, that's, you know, that's a huge telltale sign, but chances are we're not going to be seeing a colleague walking around with a beer in their hand. So what, you know, what can we be looking out for that might be an opportunity for us to pull them aside and say, you know, hey, do you need some help, or just talk to them?
Yeah, that's a really good question. There's probably two aspects to that. There's if you're a poker player, then you naturally know the tells. A person who's bubbly and cheerful and happy and normally spontaneous in their interactions isn't. They're more sullen. They focus on the job. They start making mistakes. We know that industrial workplace accidents increase dramatically when there's a stressful environment. People just, it's not the fact that they're unable to concentrate, but they're unable to remember to concentrate, sort of thing. So you look for changes in personality. You look for sometimes subtle, sometimes they're major. Often with people, as bad as it sounds, their grooming and presentation may start to slip because I'm depressed. And again, there's all sorts of levels of depression. And in medicine, it's a different type of definition than what you and I would be looking for. But if you can barely get out of bed and you've got 10 minutes to get dressed, get yourself to work, you haven't had a shower in a couple of days, you haven't got your hair, you're wearing the same clothes you wore yesterday, they're probably pretty good indicators that something's going on. So that would be my two key ones.
Great. And John Fitzgerald had a question. He's looking for a book that anybody could recommend that his company could read that would address mental health or even just deal with crisis management. If you've got any suggestions for that.
Whew, there is hundreds. I do. I am. Here's the problem I've got. I'm blanking on the one I want to, the one I'm thinking of, and I can see the cover. I can see everything about it. I can't. I'll have to get back to you on that one. But there's a couple of really good ones. One that is not necessarily a one for coping and stress, but and I forget the author's name, but it's called Extreme Ownership, and that's a good one. It's about from a business and a leadership point of view more than anything else. This thing on extreme ownership is really good. Basically, it's taking responsibility for your actions, owning up to them, standing by them, and in the military they use a term called collaborative leadership, which also works especially in small teams where you've got to basically lace your cards as a leader, as a manager on the ground and saying, look, we're in tough times. Right? I don't know how we're going to pay the next set of wages unless we get this order out. And you explain it to the team, and the team who have the work in the problem often can come up with a solution. And by collaborative leadership, everybody's got a stake in the game. Everybody has ownership of the situation, and everybody's pulling in the same direction. Another one that's I think is of interest at the moment, but not necessarily directly related to managing stress. There's one, it's got a terrible name. It's called On Combat. But it's not really to do with the military. It's got to do with the physiological response to stress and what it does to your body and what it does to your thinking and your ability to to cognitively think your way out of situations under extreme stress. It's obviously written with military aspects in mind, but there are so many lessons in there that you can apply to everyday life. That is the one. Those two in particular ones I particularly like, but I will find the one that I'm thinking of, and when I do, I'll send you the link.
Okay, anybody else have any questions?
Yeah, I have a question for Brent.
Yep.
As you're working amongst your peers and fellow work people, and you see somebody that you sense is struggling, poorly dealing with stress, particularly if that individual is in your management group in a leadership position, any strategies on how to try to help that individual de-stress, how to kind of bring them back down from the edge of the cliff, so to speak?
Yeah, that's a toughie, that one. This is part of the reason why we don't like dealing with it, because everything is tough in it. The one thing you don't want to do is be a solution provider. I found that out the hard way with my wife. She had a very stressful job. She also worked in mental health for many years, and our drive home, she would just rant and rave about her job and how terrible it was. And I would sit there and go, well, if you only did this or you did this, it'd make life easier. You should try this. And then she just eventually looked at me and just shut up and drive and just listen. And I think that's one way. If you can get them talking and listen, and provide some, like, a lot of people sit there and they feel alone, that they're the only people feeling this way. They're the only way people who are in the same situation, and being able to be empathetic, I think goes a long way as well. And then other times that works sometimes. Other times it's literally, you and I need to go for a walk, or you and I need to go for a beer and just have a heart-to-heart and sit there and say, look, and without being recrimination or confrontational, and say, look, I know something's going on. This is what I see, and I know that's not you, and I know that's, and I know that you know that's not you. You know, I'm here to help, or just to listen to, but seriously, we need to sort this out. And I mean, that's the other end of the non-confrontational, confrontational strategy. But it's extremely hard, especially when they're in management, especially when you're on an equal peer level, or slightly above or slightly below. And again, there's no great answer to this. If there's a lot of change going on, one of the other things that you can look for is there's a couple of theories that you can apply that, again, I've also found quite successful. One is called change theory. So this works very well with collaborative leadership as well, when you've got to pivot your business. So you're a manufacturing business, you're making stuff, your business is basically drying up, and you've got to come up with another strategy to pivot your business and make something else. And you've got people on board who may be resistant to change. And if you've got a working knowledge of change theory, then it makes life much easier. And I've used it in my career, where you categorize people into supporters, detractors, passive aggressive, and aggressive. There's lots of different names for this, but once you understand where people sit within the matrix, then you're able to apply individual strategies to get them on board, to get them to where they need to go. We need more than one cheerleader in a company, and so change theory is one. If you're already well versed with change theory, then look at something called nudge theory, which is also equally as simple. It's like nudging people in the right direction. And then sometimes the decision has to be, if you're a manager, made very hard, that if you've got someone who is resistant to change, that is now becoming a passive aggressive person who will say everything and, yep, everything's wonderful, but at the same time do everything in their power to subvert what you're trying to do, that person does not belong in your society, in your group anymore. And so if you identify them early enough as part of the model, then there's two places for them to go, either up or out. They either become active aggressive, which means that they tell you they're angry and they tell you what's wrong with the business, and they tell you why you're doing everything wrong, which on the sounds of it doesn't sound very good, but it's good to know where you stand. And they'll often also point out all the things that are going wrong. And if you listen to them, they'll also sometimes give you a couple of nuggets of really useful information. But if they become passive aggressive and then go quiet, then they don't belong in the organization.
Well, I know it would be great if I could get nudged to get to working out more and having fewer Zoom cocktail parties, and maybe let's have a Zoom workout party.
Yeah, yeah. The local gym's doing that, and I've been very bad at it.
Yes, it's a good thing. Oh, outstanding. It was really very, very educational, and definitely some great tips to take forward. Were there any other questions that anybody else had, or concepts people had? Ideas?
It's been helpful. Thank you.
Yes,
Yeah,
very much.
definitely enjoyed your presentation, Brent.
Not a problem. What I will say, although I'm very much a doom and gloom at the moment because I'm heavy on the medical side, and in our industry, it's hard to be positive when you see mistakes being made and missteps that shouldn't have been made. But we are in an industry that is really resilient. I've seen some good murmurings from the charter market because, again, it's been able to keep your heads above the weed. That I looked at some of the brokers and I thought, oh, okay, they're just trying to put a positive spin on it no matter what, because you've got to try something. But if you think about our other side of our business is business aviation, so private jets. And as the airline industry was going downhill, the private jet industry was going uphill, because people who could afford to fly privately were flying privately because they didn't want to have contact with large groups of people that could be infected. So they were opting for a more expensive flight by business jet. And the charter market could be the same, that people who have got money will still want to travel and will still want the experience, and they can, where they may not have decided before on doing a charter, may actually decide on the charter as well. So there's that. We know that a lot of some of the bigger yachts are almost in hibernation, but they've got to come out at some stage and for reprovisioning and that sort of stuff. So I see a lot of opportunity if you can have the time to read the tea leaves rather than getting on the wheel and trying to go as fast as you can in the business that you're in that is struggling at the moment with the current situation. You've got to try and look forward and look for those opportunities. And I'm hoping that what we talked about that has worked for me in the past in a similar stressful situation for myself. Again, a little bit of disclosure. I think at one time I was about 2 days before bankruptcy. And managed to somehow trade myself out of it, or we managed to trade ourselves out of it with just by the skin of our teeth. But if we just sat back and said, this is it, doom, we would never have got anywhere.
Well, that's really good to think about. And I've been chatting with the guys in the charter industry as to your points. And right now in the Northeast, I only know about less than 5% of the charters that have actually canceled. At this point, they're kind of waiting for the states to open up so that there could be some transit in between the various states without having the fear of having to self-quarantine. If so, say they stopped in Connecticut, they'd have to stay there for 2 weeks, or if they went to New York, et cetera. So, we're anticipating that the Northeast will definitely be a later but somewhat strong charter season, and the same thing for the Pacific Northwest as well. So, we'll hope that we can kind of eke out some good positives out of this mess and see how we can go from there. But thank you again, Brent and Victoria, for making this happen, and the wonderful people at MedAire. You guys are great supporters of the U.S. Superyacht Association, and we're so happy to have you. And to everybody that took the time out of your day today to come and learn a little bit more about how to deal with all the stress in this uncertain and psychotic time for so many of us. If you have any questions, Brent, what we'll do is we can send out a follow-up email and make sure we post things. Are people able to reach out to you directly, or?
Yes, absolutely.
You can at least put them in touch with some of the resources that you might be able to help them with.
Yeah, absolutely, more than happy to.
Fantastic. Yep. So I think that would be a great way to follow up from there. And we look forward to seeing everybody else here next Thursday, same time, 11:30. and we're looking how to, next week is pivoting purposefully. Is that, or are we doing, oh no, next week is the capstone. Capstone, we're dealing about doing some great business and how we can look to do some tips on how we can take advantage of some of these crazy opportunities that are out there in the market and grow your business even in a down economy. So over that time, U.S. Superyacht Association is here for you. There's a lot of tips, a lot of resources and things on our website at ussuperyacht.com on our news section. So please don't hesitate to check in there or give us a ring here at the association. We are here working every day, and we're available for you guys. And if we don't know the answer, we can certainly put you in touch with the right people. So thank you all so much. Stay safe, stay well, and we'll look forward to seeing you next Thursday. Take care. Bye.
Thank you, Kate.